All right, why don't we get started? I'd like to call to order the February 22nd, 2022, 2022 meeting.
At 6:02.
At 6:02. Thank you all for joining us. We'll go around for introductions. Let's do who's in the room here first, and then we'll jump to folks who are online.
Amy McGlashan, Victoria Jetty, Trip Malcolm,
Mary Heather Noble.
Barbara Wilson.
Peter Conlon.
Logan Price, Business Manager.
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
Caitlin Steele, Assistant Superintendent, Teaching and Learning. Nicole Carter, Director, Equity and Student Services.
Jen,
Newceder.
Peter,
Peterborough Superintendent.
Eddie,
Lindsay Hescock.
Betty,
Betty Kafumbe.
Suzanne,
Suzanne Bach.
and could you also read for us, Will, those who are attending?
Sure. We have Bruce McIntyre.
I just brought over Lorraine too.
Oh, great.
Bruce McIntyre, our Facilities Director. Dee Bertolf, Emily Blistine, Hugh McLaughlin, Julia Mensch, Laura Seebecker, MCTV, Ruth Bernstein, and Tanya Scuteri.
Great. And Lorraine, could you introduce yourself?
Lorraine Morse.
Thank you.
Could I also just one point of order, just for everyone? Emily's last name is like Einstein.
Lifetime.
Blistein.
Thank you.
Yeah. I made the mistake too, and so I just wanted to share the correct pronunciation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, at this time, we would like to provide the opportunity for public comment. We have a 6:45 deadline on today's meeting because of the next meeting that's happening. So we're going to limit public comment to 2 minutes. At this time, if anyone would like to make a public comment, there's no one here in the room. So anyone online, please raise your Zoom hand.
Okay, we have Laura Seebecker.
Hello. Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I am speaking to reiterate concerns that I raised at the January 2020 meeting when the Truex-Collins report was first presented about the facilities plan. I noticed that, at least for Shoreham, there was information that was claimed to be missing or unavailable. And in doing my own research, I went down to the town clerk's office and found blueprints and files dating back to the 1950s that answer all of the questions that were left unanswered in that report. I don't know if there was any outreach made to the towns, to the select board, to the town clerk in advance, or if Truex-Collins felt that it was part of their due diligence to find this information. Our town clerk has since provided copies of all of this information, I believe, to you, Bruce. However, it's not clear if this new information has been incorporated into the plan, into the report, if there has been any updates or edits made. And I'm concerned that if this is true for Shoreham, there might be information that's critical missing from the other town records as well. So I strongly advise that the Truex-Collins facilities report be reviewed and reconsidered before this data is used to underlie the decisions facing us, to estimate the costs that are incumbent upon Ocona's in repairing our schools, and to seek greater communication with select boards and with town offices that are huge repositories of institutional information for our towns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay, great. All right, there's no other comments at this time. There's another comment.
Tanya Scuteri.
Hi.
Tanya.
Hello. So I wanted to give it some feedback on the document to follow up on what Laura said. When the March 2020 Truex Collins report came out, several community members raised concerns of over $600,000 worth of recommended repairs that were one at $380,000 was just false. It implied that the district would be responsible for paving and maintaining land that's owned by the town. The district only owns the building. It does not own the town, the parking lots, any of the land. Those concerns were brought up over and over and over. They were never addressed. They were never substantiated. They were never corrected. That we're carrying these numbers forward. That 600,000 represents 40% of the Shoreham expenses. And so I do wonder about other buildings and if there are similar inaccuracies. In the report, I noticed priority 1 is listed as code violations. And there's a whole range of items that are not code violations, including about 300,000 related to lighting in the Shoreham building, which at the time was only 6 years old and a system designed by Efficiency Vermont. So I think that code violation needs to be expanded upon because priority 1 are not code violations. Very few actual true code violations exist. In section C3, there's a comment about enrollment declining well into the next decade. As of 2018, the time that statement was made, enrollment had stabilized for 8 years. We are not going to see declining enrollment. We have about 2 large classes left that are graduating in the next few years. And then we're stabilized, which is really nice. That's going to help our planning for going forward. But that statement of declining into the next decade, it's just not substantiated by enrollment numbers. So thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. On the other hand. Great. Okay, at this time, I'd like to move on to the next item, which is a motion to approve the minutes of February 14th. If I could have a motion.
So moved.
Second. Amy. So that was moved by Chip and seconded by Amy. Any comments or discussion on the minutes?
Suzanne, I have one correction on towards the end when I talking about large schools. I was actually talking about small schools, and that the small schools initiative defines small schools as between 200 and 400 students. So big difference.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the minutes? Okay, with that change then, could all those in favor to approve the minutes, say aye or raise your Zoom hand?
Aye.
Jen, is that? Any opposed? Oh, any, go ahead, Jen.
I need to abstain. I'm the last one.
I know I'm gonna get you. No one abstain. Did you get that, Suzanne? Great. So moved. Okay, next up is report of the board, the facilities master plan. So I'm going to turn this over to Victoria. Just a reminder to folks, at this point, our job tonight is to vote on the plan. We have now gone through the revision process. Mary Heather has once again delivered, and we're to a point now where we're voting to say that this document represents the work that was done, the information that was received, and acts as a tremendous artifact for this community. So Victoria, I'll turn it over for you.
Yeah, I hope that you all had a chance to read it. Thank you again, Mary Heather, for getting those updates to everyone in such a timely manner. I think what I'd like to do is just dive in, and if you have any questions or clarifications that you're looking to have answered tonight before we vote, let's just dive into that. And then, as Mary said, the plan is to vote on whether the board will adopt this as the official record for what we did, what we learned, and what we believe is important moving forward. So with that, does anybody have any questions, clarifications, comments? Sure.
Well, I read over everything that was updated. You sent it out in red so that we could separate it out from the rest of what we had talked about. And I think you accomplished generally what were the basic concerns of those folks who made them. I think this is a kind of document that, one can sort of continue forever on. Number one, because the longer we go on it, life changes and things change and there's going to be updates. I appreciate the comments of people who have been very diligent in reading it and questioning it. I'm not sure that certain data on certain schools is going to change the overall composite of this plan and how we go forward. I think it would be much more significant if, in fact, we had made a judgment in this plan as to school reconfigurations or changes on information that we didn't put in the plan at this point. We didn't with this plan, and I feel it's important to approve it. And I think not approving it, would be a tragedy, I think, because I don't see that we could sort of reconstitute it all and continue on that way. So that's my take.
Thank you. Anyone else? Barb?
Hi, thank you. First, I want to say thank you, Mary Heather, for the great job and, the changes that you made. My primary focus was looking at the next step section because that was in the new information that was included in there. I did, as I was going through things again, because of that last section, and I actually have this kind of typed up, I can share with everybody, and give you a copy. In fact, I can give this to Mary Heather, which might be half easier. I think what would be awesome, and this doesn't really affect, the voting tonight, some of these comments, if we would define resource of equity, because we talk about it multiple times, and I, actually went to ERS strategies, and they had a definition that I thought was pretty good as a, just as a straw person kind of definition. But I think that would help as people are reading it. What are we talking about? Because people have different views. I also then actually listened to Caitlin and Vicky's presentation for September 2020 again, which is awesome because I know some of the concerns I had was on equity and that kind of thing. So I thought it was important to go back and look at that. And so I did actually notice, and I could be wrong, but when I looked at the model for the 3 and 4 school, Vicki had highlighted the need for a math and reading coach that would be shared across the district. And in those staffing profiles that we have for 3 and 4 schools models, I think we may have missed that as an item. A couple other just things was, and on page 5960, identifies after school care as a benefit, was also included in the presentation as well as pre-K. And again, we haven't really done any costing associated with that. In fact, we actually have less pre-K than we did. So that could be a candidate for the next steps, is to really look at that, right? And that's why I'm bringing it up. It's really candidates for next steps. The one thing, just to be aware of, on page 60, when we talk about tier 2 and tier 3 services, the document does specify that consolidation will lead to increased access of support services. But if you use Mary Hogan as an example, folks are struggling with the fact that where we're only increasing special educators by 1 and speech and language pathologists by 2 and eliminating 32 paras, but yet increasing the number of folks, that is really going to lead to better services. So, maybe more detail in the future, more study around that of how that would be the case would be helpful. It would be, this document now had page 64, survey information that was not there before. It would be awesome, like we've done with a lot of the other resources, is just to provide a summary link to the source of that, like we did for some of the other stuff. And page 71, again, it's similar to the previous comment where it states student access to services would be greatly expanded with consolidation. And again, when you look at that Mary Hogan example, folks are struggling. And those were the nature of some of the comments that people actually brought up in the past.
Can I stop you
Yep.
for just 1 second? Back to your thing about page 64.
Uh-huh.
Oh, survey summary link.
Survey summary link.
Yes, and
Yes.
that's the intent, and that, I don't know if you could see that, but we have a little comment on the side.
Oh,
that
I didn't
says
see that.
we
I am
plan
so
to
sorry.
Live link.
Yep.
Put a link to that, so yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, that
sorry.
was just a minor suggestion.
Yeah.
And now we're really kind of in the latter part of the document. Page 74, question number 7. I have a suggested addition to that text that the board would need to develop a detailed cost saving assessment that takes into account any additional costs that might result from closing a school and implementing the closure plan. In other words, really a holistic kind of view of what the savings would be. And I thought that might be a good place for it. And then I just kind of have a bullet list of priorities moving forward on the back. And I just added one based on one of the public comments is to true up facility cost needs and estimates as needed. Number 1. Number 2, an assessment of the 6th grade move to moms in terms of cost savings, equity of resources, staff reduction and feedback, and operational efficiency, because if folks are looking at that as kind of an example for what could happen with consolidation. Perform a final financial assessment considering service and staffing projections, transportation impacts, facility reconfiguration costs, etc. So I think that was kind of a repeat of the previous statement I did in number 7. Since many studies have indicated that rural kids who struggle have better outcomes when they attend schools closer to home with smaller class sizes, it would be great if we could identify how the district would address this so that these students don't fall further behind. And, acknowledging it and that way we can address it or know how we've mitigated it. Likewise, research has shown that if you move students to a higher performing school, they ultimately do better. However, if you move them to a lower performing school, learning outcomes decline. So this is really yet another area that I think, we could do some more work on to ensure parents that, we got that covered. And performing design and cost assessment of offering pre-K and after-school programs to realize the equity benefits that are highlighted on pages 59 and 60, and implement a plan to address the facility inequities that exist between the schools selected for consolidation. Unfortunately, when you look across the gamut, the study, the Truex Collins study, was pretty obvious that not all our buildings are equal. And when, Salisbury's, pretty cool as far as the amount of space it has, that kind of thing. But of the other rural schools, they're limited. And even Truex Collins had identified with Bridport that maybe you had to do an expansion, that kind of thing. So I think we do need to look at those facilities because there would be still inequities depending on, what schools we select. Finally, define a plan for how to measure the effectiveness of the final consolidation configuration. And if anyone would like a copy of this, I'd be happy to share it.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Yes.
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought we were here to vote on what was done since the last meeting. And what I'm gathering from what you're saying is that this is an amendment to your document that you've spent a lot of time on, I understand, is an amendment to this document. So for us to approve it, we have to go through every single component of it. And on the other side, am I taking it that if that isn't in it, that you would not vote for the approval of this?
So what I thought we were doing, we left the other meeting that we were going to try to have a primary focus on next steps. And so that was all new material. And so after, reviewing and I was away at a funeral, so I wasn't able to submit it early if that was the case, but I am focused on kind of what steps forward that we need to do to make sure that it's a good plan.
You didn't answer my question, I guess. I mean, I understand, it's a lot of work, and I applaud you on being as detailed as you are, but we're at the stage now where
We're voting on this
we are
plan.
past that.
And also we're
We're
voting
voting
on
on
the
this
document.
document.
Right,
The document that we have in front of us, without revisions at this point.
without revision.
Without revisions. Now, there's work that we're going to have to do after this plan is released, that we're gonna have to take those next steps and continue to flush out how we do them and things that have to improve. And that will be an opportunity for the next board to have those conversations. But tonight's vote is on this plan.
And your data is important, I'm not making
Yeah,
it light, okay?
So
But it has to do with
Right,
this
I have
document.
to beg to differ from the last meeting. We basically were gonna have yet another draft based on input. And the whole purpose was to be able to see that input and be able to comment on it.
That's what I sent you on Friday.
Exactly, and that's what I'm looking and commenting on.
Okay.
So I think I guess there was probably a misunderstanding. So on the 14th, board members provided their input, and that input was incorporated into the revisions, which is what you see in red. And I guess folks had the understanding that we're voting on this document, as opposed to
Additional
making
revisions.
additional revisions to this document before voting again. So I think, and so I guess, like a sort of procedural question would be, does this board feel like some of the elements brought to our attention by Barb would need to be added before we make a vote, or say, this document with the understanding that, additional details with respect to, more details on the cost, or.
The vote is our way as individual board members to say yes or no, do we agree with this document? And that's what we have to do as board members. And we're never going to go through a process in which everyone is going to agree to every line. It's impossible. And that's why we have a vote. And so at the last board meeting, we said we were going to vote tonight. I think I said that 3 or 4 times. And so that's and we're gonna vote on the document that Mary Heather had an opportunity to make the revisions based upon the last board meeting conversations. And she sent that out and had those revisions in red. And so we're giving people an opportunity to make any final comments, but we're still gonna have a vote on this document. Amy.
Yeah, I guess what I really like some of what you say, Barb, and it makes me think of other things too. And maybe it's not explicitly said in the last section, but it's implicit in a lot of the work that's outlined that those kind of discussions need to take place. I don't know if that's enough to, reassure you. I mean, I really like some of what you said, and there's some things I don't agree with and would want to talk about, but now I agree it's not the time to talk about them. I guess that would be the work of the next board to outline in more specifics, a longer, more detailed list of what are those next steps or the data points that really matter. So I don't know. I just was trying to sort of reinforce that yes and.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think some of what you say are sort of, subtext to bullet points that are already within that, sort of flesh it out more.
Clarifying,
And,
yeah.
yeah, they're more
Absolutely.
clarifying. And so, I appreciate the work that you've done, and I don't want you to feel that it's going to be lost, Because as we've said, this is, this is a document that is just giving us a picture in time, but the work continues. And so what you're talking about, that work isn't going to get lost. There will be time for those discussions as the work of this board moves forward, fleshing out some of the next steps and moving into the equity study and such.
One comment.
Yeah.
The facilities committee met after the last board meeting and considered all of these different parts, correct? And then you put them into words.
Well, we met to discuss the comments that were gathered from the February 14th meeting and specifically tried to work on the comments, the sort of repeated comments that section G needed to be fleshed out a little bit more and improved. And so that's what our focus was. Some of these bullet points in particular that Barb has provided, I think I agree with Victoria, could kind of slide in as sort of sub bullets or, kind of further indented bullets to some of these existing ones where they kind of clarify some of the, remaining work that could be done. And I think to some degree, and I don't know how this impacts how we vote tonight, but, as we tidy up the final report, I don't see that it's prohibitive for us to clarify some of these bullet points, but I would want to make sure that, the full board is understanding what it's voting on. So I don't know how to get around that exactly, but I do see some of these things as, just clarifications to existing points, if that makes sense.
I agree. And I think the vote tonight is not to say that we're voting on every single word, that there will still be fleshing out. And as Mary and Heather and I met with Ben Merrill, who's going into design phase, and he said, what his experience is with groups is that when you get the designed version, it's as if you're seeing it for the first time. And so we had sort of said we've been swimming in the information and that we're feeling like maybe there are parts that are repetitive. And he said, once it's designed, you see it again for the first time, and then you're able to sort of adjust, take out if you feel that you've repeated information too much, or sort of clarify and pull out, call boxes and that sort of thing, so that you can really, the information can be seen as well as read. And so I think that this document, yes, we're voting on all of the material within and the concepts within, but in terms of every single word, those will change. And so I do think that, to Mary Heather's point, that some of the to be done work could be fleshed out, to be more explicit.
And I want to make sure that from a substantive perspective, that we're not changing.
We are not changing.
We are not changing. Because it's important that we are all understanding that that's what we're voting on.
That's what we're voting on.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Peter?
Just a reminder that this is a snapshot of a point in time.
Right.
It's really a look back at what we've done. As we take steps forward that come out of this facilities master plan, so much of it that we're talking about right now will come up. I mean, we're not going to create a bond based on the Truex Collins report.
Right.
We will do our due diligence and with all of that information before we take a deep dive into doing anything. So I just, it's just to put it in context, I guess.
Yep. Yes.
I guess the other thing to keep in mind, just to follow Peter's point, is if a bullet is absent, or we think of a bullet after the fact, that doesn't, prevent us from doing additional work beyond what's stated in this section, as it comes up and is necessary. So even though we're trying to be, and I think our committee was trying to be pretty thorough in capturing, the work and recognizing what work needs to be done moving forward, there's always the possibility that things have been missed and that we will recognize that as we do move forward and that we will continue to address those things. And maybe that's just a little escape clause to, we're human and there may be some things.
Well, it's any report of any board, of any entity is not gonna hit this, it is a snapshot. And that's the thing that I hope is so clear to folks, to our community, to our board members. This represents a period of time and it represents information that was gathered. The work that comes from this is going to be important, and we will use that information in this report, and it will continue to be checked. It's going to continue to be considered. It's going to continue to be debated before we make any actions or release any bond. This is going to be one of the things that we pull from, and we'll be able to debate the points there, just like we debate history books and whether or not they accurately reflect what they're trying to reflect. And so that, I think, is really the important component of this as we move forward. The debate's not over. It shouldn't be. This stuff's too important. But this is a snapshot. Any other comments? Great.
Lindsay.
Oh, Lindsay.
Okay. Can you hear me? Thank you for all of the additions, the table of contents, that's, it just keeps getting better and better. As far as voting, I understand the task at hand. It's also strange to vote on a draft and not a final project or like the final draft. And some of the things that Barb said and some of the, like in the public comments, the reference to the town clerk information and, if there are going to be further edits, it's hard to vote yes, knowing that there will possibly be more changes and then how the final draft will look. So I'm really, trying to decide which way to vote, not because I don't respect the content of this and the intention of it, but just voting on a draft versus a final product. And then as far as the substance goes, sometime in the fall of 2020, there was talk of new construction, and I was trying to look at where it would have appeared, and maybe around page 61 or 67, I don't know, but I'm just wondering if I missed that. It was something about like just evaluating another model that would involve new construction. So that was really that was one of the things I wondered about, that, that was historical. But it's so full of information. And also we have, because I'm not on the facilities committee, it almost feels rushed to take something of such tremendous substance and value. And we've gotten some good feedback, and it's clear that some of, it's really been taken to heart and added to this version 5 of the document. But we have more feedback today, and we could, I don't know who said it, but you could just revise this until you're blue in the face, and there's no way to have every single comma and word approved, but we have gotten some good feedback. And so I'm just trying to decide, like, I don't feel comfortable, like completely comfortable voting yes, because it's not the final draft, not because this isn't really strong as it is. And I'm not sure what to do about that. I don't know if there's a way to provide a next step for us to consider. before we do something that, interfacing with the public beyond the, just the draft that we shared with everyone?
I have a comment about that. Well, I guess a couple things, to your point, Lindsay, I do, I think it's been made clear that this report is a reflection of the work of the existing board. And that I think is why there's this sense of, this board should vote on it, because this is the board that conducted the work. Secondly, it's also the work of the board and an artifact of the work of the board, and it's not a decision document where there's where feedback from the community needs to be incorporated into changing the content of the, aside from, factual information that's been incorrectly communicated or whatever. So I'm not certain that having a public forum to provide feedback on this is really appropriate, because I don't think it's the kind of board decision, or it's more of an artifact of the sequence of events and the information that was presented and compiled. And at least that's my understanding. And I do want to follow up on a question regarding the September. I guess I'm not even really understanding what this September 2020, I'm not aware of a presentation from September 2020.
It's a link in your document.
September 2020?
Yeah, the actual presentation was in your document. There's a link.
Where is that? Do you know what page, Barb or Mary Heather?
September, October and November from 2018. There's January 2020 and March 2020. I'm not really certain what you're referring to when you're referring to September 2020. I don't know what presentation you're talking about. Jen has her hand up. Maybe she's got
Jen?
Yeah, there was, I believe that new building study, that was part of the initial conversation. So I think maybe you just have the years wrong. I think it was meant to be the prior, the beginnings of like, want to build a new building, and or do we want to the west side and have revisions to Mary Hogan? That was the conceptual conversation. In the 20, that was COVID, there were no major presentations happening then. And then just, I think my internet's wonky. I'll stop my video. And then just to clarify voting on a draft, I believe we're voting on a draft because we haven't finalized a version yet. But once we vote on this, it will no longer be a draft. Is that true? And then, there might be some formatting changes and some, fine tuning of a typo or two. But my understanding is we're voting on a draft because it's not final until we vote to approve it.
That is correct. That is correct. The substance is not going to change.
Right, but to clarify Lindsay's concern that we're voting on a draft rather than a final draft, this is the final version, but it's only listed as a draft because we haven't voted on it yet, Lindsay. That's why it's called a draft still.
All right, I think we need to move on to vote since Governor Douglas will be here in 3 minutes.
Great, could I then get a motion to, I wrote it down. A motion to approve the ACSD Board Facilities Master Plan document. Amy, set the motion. Second, please. Jen? Jen seconding it. Great, so at this time, if I could get folks to, all those in, any final comments? Yes, Barb.
Out of respect of, the community, and I'm not seeing this as bad work whatsoever, I'm gonna basically say no. I know I'll be the only one, but it's more out of respect because, they've said things that haven't been heard, that kind of thing, and I think some of my comments would help alleviate that. So out of the respect for them, I'm gonna basically say no.
Any other comments? Great, could we, all those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye. Aye. One, two,
We need Betty.
Betty,
Or Suzanne.
Betty and Suzanne, I don't see if you're saying or eyeing or anything. Okay, Suzanne.
Sorry, I'm driving.
Great. Betty, Suzanne, Lorraine, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Any opposed, please raise your hand or say nay.
Nay.
1, 2. Great. Nobody abstained, right?
No, that's all of us.
Great. The document has been approved. And I do have a couple of comments. I want to thank Mary and Heather. I want to thank Victoria and the facilities committee in working through to get us to this point. And I think it is super important for this community to know that there is tremendous work that needs to continue. And there are opportunities for additional information. There's opportunities for clarification. There's opportunities for new information. And as we work through these challenges and as we are led by the strategic plan for equity, there's a lot more that has to be done. And this is a snapshot of some significant effort that has gone on over the past, how many years? And so while it may seem rushed to some, I think for the majority of us, it does not seem rushed. And I understand, Lindsay, kind of, from a timeline perspective, it's a little bit of a different timeline for you, but this has been a tremendous amount of work, so thank you all. Chip?
I would like the minutes to reflect that the reasons for the 2 negative votes, because I think it's unusual to not have, unanimous consent in this. I understand the reasons why the dissenters are saying it, but I hope the minutes express their reasons, which are substantial, and whatever. But I just hope that that's the case, Suzanne.
Great. Any other comments? Okay, so
Just thanks to everyone for your feedback and your patience with it, and I really appreciate it.
Now we have another project.